Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen, and with us for our program today, Assemblyman Andy Goodell. Andy Goodell represents the 150th Assembly District, an Assembly District that includes Chautauqua County. We want to thank you folks in Western New York for joining us. Andy Goodell, nice to see you. Happy 2015.
Great to be here, and it's starting out to be an exciting year.
It is an amazing start to this 2015 legislative session. We have already heard from the governor in his State of the State address. We have already heard from him in his budget presentation to the legislature as those two events kind of got mashed up into one. But all of that takes a back seat right now, Assemblyman Goodell.
Absolutely.
Due to the fact that for another year, we start off these series of programs talking about legislators who are under investigation, who face charges, who are taken out in handcuffs from the state capitol. Except this time, it's not just any old state legislator, it's the Speaker of the New York State Assembly, Sheldon Silver.
And there have been obviously a lot of questions about Sheldon Silver for many years. As you may recall, there were allegations back in 2013 that he improperly solicited campaign contributions when there were bidders trying to get the state franchise to run the racetracks at Aqueduct and Belmont and Saratoga. Of course, he played a lead role in trying to cover up the sexual harassment claims against Vito Lopez, and in connection with that, actually signed a voucher for a $103,000 cash settlement to some of the victims, and incorrectly described it as being for legal fees. Now, for you and I, if we submitted a voucher to the state and falsely described the services as legal fees when they were a cash payment, that's a misdemeanor, filing a false instrument. But Sheldon Silver skated on that. The most recent allegations, of course, is that through a convoluted arrangement, he got almost $4 million in kickbacks from two different law firms without doing any legal work. And that violated, of course, federal laws. Those payments were sent through the mail, which is why the federal government has jurisdiction. As you know, you have to have some federal connection. But it also laid bare the fact that he was flagrantly violating the legislature's own laws regarding financial disclosures. For, it looks like, over a decade, he failed to disclose not only any of the money that he was getting from one of those two law firms, but even the existence of that second law firm. And the amount of money that he was reporting as receiving from outside income was grossly underreported.
Now, the reason you have those laws in place, or those rules for the legislature in place, is really just for that purpose, to say well, this would represent, by having these types of claims made, that the legislator in question was not misusing his authority, his power as a member of the legislature to, personally profit from such activities.
And as the criminal complaint shows, that is exactly what was happening with Sheldon Silver. He was using his power as the assemblyman, as a Speaker of the Assembly, to personally line his own pockets. And so the disclosure statement requires us to disclose the name and identity of anyone who's paying us, the source of any income, so that it can be checked to make sure that we're not being bribed, and the amount in general categories of how much we were being paid. There was one year where Sheldon Silver earned almost $1 million on these kickback schemes involving these two law firms. But on his financial reporting, he only reported $250,000. Now, if you're a successful attorney in New York City, it is reasonably conceivable that you could earn $250,000 in legal fees, because they charge an awful lot more per hour than I do in Chautauqua County, believe me. That is conceivable. It's inconceivable that you could earn nearly $1 million. And of course, the reason he didn't disclose the second law firm is because he did absolutely nothing for the second law firm. He wasn't even a member of that law firm. and they were giving him a kickback for referrals from developers in New York City that he asked to go to that law firm in return for tax favors and legislation that he was in charge of in Albany.
It's interesting reading, and you folks, if you want, could go online and read the official criminal complaint against the Speaker. I was taking a look at the New York Times, who kind of translated that for me, all the legalese for this non-lawyer to understand what was going on, and it sounded as if the referrals that a doctor made to the law firm that he is a representative of, and so some of the money flowed that way. It sounded also as if the Speaker then got state funding to go down the pike to that doctor for some research that he was doing. So that kind of completes a circle that really kind of calls into question again this idea of personally profiting from his state legislative position.
So we actually have several violations. The criminal complaint laid out two. The first violation is where Shelley Silver got two separate grants for a doctor who headed up a research hospital dealing with asbestos-related cancer. Each grant was in the amount of $250,000. That doctor then referred cancer patients to Shelley Silver's law firm. Silver's not doing any work at all, but got 1/3 of the fee. And that 1/3 of a fee amounted to over $3 million. And when the doctor started getting supported by another law firm on his research and started pulling back on his referrals, Shelley Silver went and talked to him again, got him special state recognition, got one of his relatives a job with another not-for-profit that depended on state grants for their existence or for their funding, and the doctor's referrals went back up. So that's one. Clearly using state money to buy, in a sense, referrals from the doctor. The second situation is where Shelley went to a couple of the largest real estate developers in New York City. And one of those developers has almost $1 billion in real estate. And all that real estate is subject to special rules on rent controls and taxation that come up every couple of years in the Assembly. So Shelley went to that developer, well, two of them, and said, I'd like you to use this particular law firm that was headed up by his former legal counsel. These developers, of course, they don't want to irritate the Speaker. The Speaker controls legislation that they depend on for their very financial existence. So, or I should say for their financial success, not their existence, but their success. So the developer said, sure. Unbeknownst to the developer, the law firm was then paying Shelley Silver a referral fee equal in some cases as high as 25% of the fee that the law firm earned. The developer didn't know it until a couple of years ago. The law firm, in accordance with the new ethics rules that apply to lawyers, sent the developer a new retainer agreement that disclosed that part of their fee was going to be sent to the Speaker. And at that point, the developer himself said, are you crazy? You want me to sign a document acknowledging that I'm indirectly paying, personally, the Speaker? And that's when things started to unravel a little bit. The third ethical violation, criminal violation in my opinion, which has not yet been charged, is a state violation for grossly underreporting the amount of outside income on his financial disclosure forms and failing to even acknowledge that he was getting money from the real estate law firm. And that's a state law violation. And of course, the irony is that the enforcement of that disclosure requirement goes through a special commission called JACOB, Joint Commission on Public Ethics, which consists of members that include members appointed by the Speaker himself. And if they find probable cause, it goes to a second commission called the Legislative Ethics Commission. Again, members of that commission, some of them, are appointed by the Speaker himself. And only if it goes through those two commissions is it referred to for criminal prosecution. So we'll see if the system works when it comes to corruption at the very top.
Now this, I would suppose, would be impossible to quantify in a criminal complaint like what we've seen brought against the Speaker, but it has been suspected for years that this sort of thing might be a reason why the Speaker, as one of the leading legislators in the state, one of the top three, if not the top political person in all of the state legislature, has never really been interested in doing anything about an issue known as tort reform. Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, how would you? I mean, it just seems obvious, but is that? I guess that's not a crime to say that you don't support a particular issue.
Part of Shelley Silver's power is that he can control what comes up for a vote in front of the Assembly, and so issues that he doesn't like or that might hurt his law firm or impact on the amount of revenue that he is getting paid on the side, he can stop that legislation. And that's a very corrupting influence. Now, as you know, the minority caucus, none of us, not one of us, voted for Shelley Silver for Speaker. Not one of us supported him. All of us, to the very last person, is calling for him to resign, right, as he should. You cannot stay as the head of the Assembly when you have the responsibility to appoint the very people who are supposed to be reviewing you, who you appoint for each of the chairs on all the committees, as well as the committee members. You cannot have somebody like that stay in power when they have such huge corruption issues facing them.
So, unfortunately, where we sit right now as this 2015 legislative session is getting underway, is the Speaker doesn't seem to have a leaning towards resigning. In fact, he says he's going to keep his position, maybe take a step back, but not relinquish his position as Speaker of the Assembly.
So the Speaker has said, I'll step back and I'll have this committee of 5 senior members take over my responsibilities. Well, that is an absolute charade. Each one of the 5 is handpicked by Sheldon Silver. Each one of those 5 are loyal lieutenants. And don't get me wrong, some of those guys are really first-class, sharp, intelligent people with personal integrity. But you can't run an organization by committee, and it doesn't change the fact that he's still in charge, that he's still the one that makes all these appointments to all these committees. He's the one that still appoints the representative on the Joint Commission on Public Ethics that's going to have the responsibility to investigate him, or the Legislative Ethics Committee has to investigate him. You cannot step part way out. There's a third problem with it. The Speaker of the Assembly is elected by the entire Assembly, at least put up for a vote. You can't select a committee to fill the shoes of the Speaker in a private backroom deal with no press, no review, no public scrutiny, but that is exactly what they're proposing to do.
He either is the Speaker or
he's not, and he shouldn't be.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting thing to watch. This is news that is breaking by the hour here at the state capitol. So I'm sure we'll be talking about it more in our next program. Andy Goodell, thanks for taking time today.
Thank you.
If you folks want to know how to reach out to your representative, it's easy to get a hold of Andy Goodell. You contact him at his office in Jamestown by dialing 664-7773 or drop an email to goodella@assembly.state.ny.us. And as we thank Andy Goodell again for joining us, thank you folks too. We'll hope to see you soon for our next Assembly Calendar.